So this morning, Church Leader Tool, I am talking with Pastor Fred Melton, who is newly retired from St. Mark's Lutheran Church in Wilmington, Delaware. And Fred, in his retirement, took on a really awesome position. He agreed to kind of be a coordinator for the resolution that the Delaware-Maryland Synod had in the 2015 gathering. That it was called the Hunger Advocacy Resolution. And so Fred was part of that this last year. And Fred, how did that end up going?
Well, it was an opportunity, Stuart, to pick up the phone and call virtually all of the pastors, all of the rostered pastors in the synod, and encourage them to talk to them about the resolution, and then see what they might be planning as a congregation. I ended up calling about 160, 155, 60 pastors and churches, and it was kind of a three-part thing. I called them in the early fall, and then I would send email follow-ups to each of them, just kind of summarizing the discussion that we had. And then I would call back in end of February, early March, and talk to them about what they actually got completed, as well as we were aiming towards a novel kind of all-church participation experience, which was a noisy change offering at the Synod Assembly. That kind of evolved in the middle of the year as a great idea, so we were now promoting that and encouraging churches to get involved. Some of the things that the churches did, I mean, there was a wide variety, a wide swath of activity. For example, I'll just run through several of them. Grace Lutheran Church in Holcassin, at Christmas time, instead of buying poinsettia flowers to adorn their altar, they encouraged people to use the same money to give as honorariums and memorials for people, and give the money and to the World Hunger Appeal. I'm sure they still had some flowers on the altar, but that really touched a lot of hearts. People ended up participating. The idea of honorariums also, in another fashion, touched Mount Zion Lutheran Church in Weimar, Maryland. Pastor Michelle Carlson there, she gave $1 per year at Christmas for her father's life as kind of an honorarium. And he had was 70 years old. And then, so that meant she wrote a check for $70, and then used that to inspire other members to do the same kind of thing. And that promotes in my mind the suggestion to churches that they could do that. They could do that as a major Mother's Day or a Father's Day event a month before, a couple of months before. Encourage people to give $1 per year for their mother's lives and their father's lives, and get as many people in the congregation to do that. And use that money then to memorialize or honor their parents, and while they support the World Hunger Appeal and the people that are served that way. Another really great idea was the noisy change opportunity, and that came in a number of different fashions. Good Shepherd Lutheran Church in Wilmington, they do that now. They started off, I think, quarterly and then monthly, but twice a month now they give their change, and the kids collect it, and it's just known within the congregation. The third Sunday of each month that will happen. And people just have change, and they just save it at the end of the day, at the end of the week. And they raise about $1,500 to $2,000 a year, almost without a whole lot of work, just by regularly doing that. That's in addition to another $3,000 or $4,000, I think, that they give from their budget and special giving and other projects. But the easy part is the noisy change. Pastor Bill Goel, who's now our bishop, at Epiphany in Baltimore, when he was serving there, they did the noisy change offering throughout Lent for 5 Wednesdays in a row. And they had educational materials out, and there was preaching, I guess, on Ash Wednesday, and posters up. And then the kids were allowed to pick the animals. The ELCA has like a barnyard animal array of ornaments that you can hang, And the kids were able to pick out from the good gifts catalog the animals that the church ought to buy. And so it was a whole cooperative thing, and they raised about $1,500 throughout that one Lenten period. And some churches, like Trinity in Boonesville, decided to do once a month noisy change, but do it to combine support of their local food pantry and the ELCA World Hunger Appeal. So that really got a lot of people excited because they were very committed to their local community. Incidentally, I found that several churches who were not that involved in the ELCA World Hunger Appeal formally were and are very involved in their local hunger appeals. And in that case, some of those churches we didn't press per se to raise more money. We just said, why don't you have a Hunger Sunday or have a period where you can have an educational piece, and therefore you can learn about what the Lutheran Church is doing globally, as well as reinforce what you happen to be doing locally. There are also lots of things that were done that were tailored to the individual congregation and their particular circumstance. For example, in St. Abraham's in Beckleysville, Maryland, the Westminster Conference, the members began raising laying chickens that lay eggs. And they bought about 2 dozen chicks, and then they got some matching money from Thrivent to do that. And then they raised those chickens as free-range, organic brown eggs being laid, and they would secure about 2 dozen eggs a week from those 2 dozen chicks, selling at I don't know, it was $3 a dozen or $36 a week, they said. And so they did that all through the summer, and then in the fall they actually sold the chickens. And the estimated profit there was about $700 to $1,000 just by raising chickens by the members. So that was a neat way that they did something locally that worked for them. Pastor Stacy Marsh at Trinity in Caneyville on the Westminster Conference did something kind of interesting. She celebrated her 70th birthday. Apparently they had a lot of people. The family put together a big affair, dinner or whatever, and the word was out that she was going to do what was called an apron dance, A-P-R-O-N, an apron dance. Mm-hmm. And so it's a Polish cultural thing, usually to raise money for a couple that's getting married. But she would go, you could dance with her at her birthday celebration, and you brought your money, but you had to put money in her apron in order to dance with her. Mm-hmm. And they raised a good amount of money dancing with Pastor Stacy Marsh. I thought about that as whenever a congregation, you could apply that even further. If a congregation was having an anniversary dinner or other people were having birthdays or anniversaries, celebrations, what a neat way that would be to recognize the needs in the world and raise some money. One congregation, this is very novel and very simple. They ordered for their offering envelopes. You get, every church gives out to their members their offering envelopes, an envelope for every week. Well, they had inserted and ordered for their offering envelopes once a month. You would run into the World Hunger envelope. Mm-hmm. So the congregation, everybody would just kind of automatically be reminded once a month. You'd go into your envelope, you take out your first Sunday, your second Sunday. That's the kind of the old school way of giving money to your congregation. And at the end of the month, there's a World Hunger envelope. And it was kind of a nifty reminder all through the year. Then there were congregations that did kind of standard things, but put a lot of extra effort into it. For example, Holy Communion in Fallstone, Pastor Chaz Weiner, she had the high school kids involved in a 30-hour famine. And a lot of churches have done that with their kids.
Mhm.
They would go 30 hours Friday night through Saturday or Saturday through Sunday morning or something without eating or maybe just with fluids. But they actually slept on concrete floor using cardboard as their bed. They wanted to identify with the homeless.
Mhm.
Throughout those 30 hours, they also had 4 Bible studies to help the kids connect with the Word of God while they were doing that. Apparently, they collected something like 25,000 pennies, or the equivalent out of it, representing the number of children who die daily of malnutrition. And they also got sponsors, $1 an hour and up and all that kind of stuff. And then when they got up in the morning, they still hadn't eaten. When they got up in the morning, they went to a feeding site called the Sharing Table, where street people came from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. And the kids fed hungry people who were homeless while they were still hungry, which was an amazing kind of, inspiration and recognition. So they finally got to eat their own turkey dinner. The church, I think they came back to their church and they had a big meal that I think Saturday night. And then Sunday morning they did the sermon and told the story of their ministry the last 30 hours. And that was pretty amazing and exciting. Christ Lutheran Church, David Simpson's church, they did a silent auction. Some churches have done that. I don't know what all their items that they collected, services as well as products, and had a great time and a lot of fun. And I think they had a dinner around that, and that raised a lot of money. But so there were a lot of, I could go on, Stu, but there were a lot of different creative ways at St. Mark's before I left in Wilmington. There were kind of 3 things that we would do each year. One was we had built a culture of giving, and so we actually had the World Hunger Appeal in our budget, $500 or $1,000 it was every year, just in the normal budget. And then twice a year, we would put envelopes in the pews, the World Hunger Appeal envelopes in the pews for a month, once in the fall and once in the spring, and then do a little bit of temple talk and encouragement, and people would use that. And then there was always a third thing that we would do, might be the youth doing some kind of fundraiser activity to raise awareness and get people involved. What I found, Stu, was that there were churches that had over the years built a kind of culture of hunger responsiveness. And people came to look forward to in a, well, I was going to say in a gentle way. They prided themselves. That's kind of in a humble way they prided themselves. Isn't that cute? But they felt good about the fact that they were a congregation that was involved in hunger responsiveness. And so whatever was going on, sometimes the projects would change, but they would look forward to, they wanted to be a part of. And I found that some of the churches in that kind of venue had a lot of prayer. They had a lot of education. There was constant teaching about the World Hunger Appeal, telling of the stories, especially explaining how ministry was occurring by the ELCA. It might be reproducible inserts. It might be videos that they would show. It might be brochures. But they were telling the story ongoingly so that people could see that the money that they were giving was having a tangible human contact and impact on people in the world. So I would call the churches and encourage them in the fall, and then some of these different things happened. We tried to encase the whole experience in prayer. The program, and usually in any program you're really doing as a congregation, just bring it to God, pray to God, ask what God's blessing would be. What does God want us to do? How does God want us to function? What kind of goals does God want us to have? And let it be spirit driven. And we did that same kind of encouragement around the Noisy Chains offering for the Synod Assembly. Maybe I will conclude with that.
Please,
Stu,
share about that.
Okay. Um, Through the year, I guess it just started became that kind of came as an idea, and the intent of the noisy change offering at the Senate Assembly really was not meant to be how much money can we raise at the Senate Assembly and just add that to the whole Senate contribution for the year. The intent really was was to find a common experience that as many churches as possible could get involved with, and it would just raise the awareness of the ELCA World Hunger Program. It would give people a gentle way to get involved, either again or anew. If a church was real active with the World Hunger Program, you don't want to beat them up to say, oh, we'll raise more money now, do something even more on top of that. You have to realize some churches had already come up with another way to to appeal to their members throughout the year in the fall or in the winter. So now here we are in the spring talking about a noisy change offering. But we wanted it to be something that was easy, that wasn't heavy on the pocketbook, but that would be give a memory and an excitement and something that we could do together. Uh, Secondly, though, we saw it as a way to help some congregations, and there were several. More than half of the churches in our synod had not been involved in the World Hunger Program in the year prior or the 2 years prior. We did find that a lot of those churches are very involved in their own hunger appeals locally. And so they were feeling the call. They understood what it meant to be hungry. They saw it, see it in their own neighborhood, and were doing local. So we saw this as a way that people could get involved easily. There were also a few churches that had historical conflicts with the synod, and so they weren't involved with the World Hunger Appeal because they'd had a bad experience of some sort. Well, this was an easy way for everyone to just come on board simply. So what we decided to do is we didn't want to be getting a noisy change offering that would appeal just to the synod representatives, the delegates. I mean, we weren't concerned about that. We wanted to use it as an opportunity for members of the churches to participate. Of course, that meant they had to have a noisy change offering in their own congregation in April or May. And then we told them, we picked a Sunday, I think it was Trinity Sunday, which was the Sunday 2 weeks before the Synod Assembly. But churches could pick whatever Sunday worked for them. And we had a nice flyer. We put that flyer out to all the congregations through an email and a mailing, personal mailing. And so I think it was about 70, which is a little less than half of the churches officially got involved, which was, I thought, pretty amazing. Mm-hmm. And they had their noisy change Sunday. And then we were going to have them bring all of their money, all their change, to the Synod Assembly. Well, an amazing problem began to emerge, which was some of these churches really went full-blown energy on it, and all of a sudden we were getting these notifications that churches had raised $400 and $600 and $800 and even $1,000 in their noisy change Sunday. I really thought it would be, something modest, and the churches would raise maybe $50 to $100 each. And it would be a nice, quiet PR, public relations thing. People would learn about the World Hunger Appeal and maybe see a video. But churches were really getting involved, and all of a sudden we had this problem of how much change would actually be brought, and would we be able to facilitate the reception of it? And so that became the challenge. And the last minute we ended up telling people, write a check for how much you have received to the World Hunger Appeal in Chicago, and just keep track of how much you raised, and then bring $10 of change as a congregation. And so we can still have the effect of noise and have a noisy change collection at the Synod Assembly. And so at the Synod Assembly, and you were there, one of the churches from, what was the name of it? Ocean City, St. Peter's, came up with these funnels and these buckets, and we ended up getting a lot of noise as congregations gave their money, and it was kind of novel, and there was energy, and it made a lot. It made a lot of noise, and ultimately, the we raised about $25,000.
Yeah,
Way.
that's
I thought we
awesome.
would raise maybe five or so, but it turned into a fine fundraiser. But we still wanted to use the Noisy Change offering as a way to promote the story of the World Hunger Appeal, and use it as a kickoff for congregations to do other things and not just see that as their way of participation. Nevertheless, there were a good handful of churches that did not, in the last 2 years, had not given to the World Hunger Appeal, who got on board with the Noisy Change offering, and I just see that as a great positive thing. And they were able to talk to their people and put some materials out there, maybe create a little energy for future participation. So that's, and as I said when I was talking about individual churches that have used the Noisy Change as a real vehicle for serious collection of funds, that's kind of an offshoot. Or actually, some of that was going on and gave an idea to us for the Synod Assembly. Why don't I wrap that up, Stuart? Do you have more questions
Fred,
about that?
thank you so much
Fred?
for sharing all that. It sounds like it was successful in so many different ways along the way. And I just want to thank you for your leadership on that team and for kind of shepherding that along. Great stuff. Great stuff. Thanks so much for sharing. We really appreciate it.